Hey, it's Mack with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and it is Thursday. It's August 20th. Today is Thursday, I think. Yeah, it is Thursday. Just a reminder, no chart lesson on Fridays during the summer. School will be starting back soon, and the time will change, and I'll probably get back to full days on Fridays again. But for now, I'm not doing them on the summer, or I'm not doing them on Fridays, short term. But we'll be starting back soon, probably. Interesting day. Early on, I treated it like a channel, really until right in here. When we confirmed this trend line, I still wasn't 100% sure because it still bounced off the midline of the two-tiered channel. And you can see once we broke lower, you're just looking for a measured move, and that we got a perfect measured move down and bounced. So I really was playing it like a channel until we kept bouncing off this line these last few times, and from there on, it was pretty obvious we were in this channel. And uh, once we got in the 2 o'clock hour, I didn't trade anything else. But you can see we had a great move down even after 2 o'clock. This thing was just weak today, um, really weak. So generally, when you get an overshoot, you're looking for a reversal. And here we just turned down off the midline again and just kept on going. Didn't really matter. It's after 2 o'clock, and I'm not going to talk about anything after 2 o'clock much. So, but early on, it was mostly like a channel here, and but this was the key to it right here when we turned back down. Um, and really, you found this right here off these three swings, and pull it up, and that gives you a clue. But it really, it was hard to really confirm it. I mean, the midline fit real nice, but it's just hard to really confirm that until right here. That's the key to it. So, uh, and what this turned out to be was a spike and a short-term channel down, and a kind of a spike and a longer-term channel down. So this one was not easy to find if you weren't paying attention, because it was hard to. It was easy to get distracted by the channel, and it really didn't matter until right in here when we started making these lower highs, and it still kind of played out. If you'd had this shorter term trend line, it still would have played out in the midline and all. Um, but you can see we turned down right off of it once again late in the afternoon. So, um, and the fact that we kept going lower here, that was another clue. So we should have probably bounced in here again. It was tempting to go long right in here, but the reason I didn't mark it was because we had this channel working down, and we really didn't have a break of it. But there's this one could be green. I probably should mark it green. I'll go ahead and make it green. But before we get into the trades today, I was going to just run back to yesterday right quick. Um, Somebody sent me an email and reminded me about it too, but I didn't think about it until the video was over. Yesterday was an FOMC announcement day, and we talked about this big overshoot right here, that we got right in here. And this was all due to the FOMC announcement. It came out at 1 o'clock, which was right in here, and that's when this really took off here. But it almost was a non-event as far as the volatility, other than the fact that the markets kept running higher. Other than that, generally you'll start getting huge bars and big swings and a big huge move down or big huge move up. So it really was a non-event, other than the fact that it drove the market on a big huge overshoot. And remember that, um, generally when you get a big news event that moves the market like that, it takes it back rather quickly and resets. And look what happened. It took it back, comes all the way back. It actually went a little lower before it bounced. So that's real common, and I should have talked about that yesterday, but I just really forgot about it because it was such a non-event other than the big overshoot there. So I thought I would come back and just, um, some of you probably were wondering, and I like to always remind people about the reset after the news. Usually when it's not 100%, but 90%, probably 90+% of the time, when you get a big huge move like that due to news, it'll take it back real quickly, and it just kind of resets and starts over from that point. But we've continued to trade down since then, and I mean, this is a huge move. We went from 2093 to a low of 2020, basically 2025. So that's a huge sell-off, just in a couple of days. That's almost a 70-point sell-off right there. So something to, you know what happens normally when we get down to these lows though. So just kind of be prepared that we might get a big rally here soon. Doesn't mean it's going to happen again, but that's generally what will happen. So, okay, let's back out here, talk about today's trades, and wrap this week up as far as chart lessons. So, a lot of green ones in here today. Um, you'll notice as well. So, um, but early on, this was, you know, we were, like I said, we played this like a range until really right in here. And really didn't get it confirmed until we went lower here. So this early on, we're playing this like a range. We had a bounce here, and there's a little failed break lower here, but notice that we had this trend line coming down. We tried to go lower once, twice, and then again. So, and you did have this little trend line working up here as well. And so it's the first break of it. So this was kind of a trap right here. And notice how it made a little lower high or a little higher low every single time. So that's a clue that we're probably going to go higher here. So I like that for a long. And then it quickly turns back down. And there is some resistance right across there. You can see that. And so this is like a failed break higher. So it didn't completely surprise me that it turned back down. And you get that little move up, a little jog up, and a second entry short right there, counting off the high. That's one leg down, pull back, so this would be your second leg down. But I don't like the signal bar there, and you really just don't get a good setup there. So I think you're better off just to sit tight and kind of wait right there and see what happens. And of course it bounces down here, and that's your first break of that trend line. Then it gives you a nice bearish bar right there. So you got to figure we're probably going to test these lows again, and you got enough room there. So I like that one for a short. And then of course it comes down here and you get all these matching lows. We'll move that up just to make it easier to see. I'm grabbing every line that I don't want to grab, and this kind of breaks lower. I would have liked this one better if it would have broke lower and went all the way out in the same bar. But when this broke higher, I'm all right with going long right there because this is strong support. I just can't seem to grab the right thing. This is strong support across here, and you can see all the closes, and then all of a sudden it breaks lower. That's a little failed break lower, and it is a second entry long. Notice this is a new swing high here. It's a double top, so you can treat it like a new swing high right there. Pull back first entry, pull back, and it's just like a little second entry. But the main reason, not really because it's a great second entry or anything, but you got your break and a couple legs down to a new low, and it breaks below here and fails. So it's a failed break lower, and this looks like a trading range, and turns out to be a great entry. And then of course it gets up here and makes a double top. It's real tempting to go short there. You do have a break and a new high. If you want to be real aggressive, yeah, I mean, that's not a real bullish bar, but it's not real bearish either. It does break higher and kind of trap people, so, you know, I probably should have that one green as well. But I think you're better off to wait on the next entry, a little lower high, and a more bearish bar, and you kind of get that one here. And so I like going short there, and if you draw your trend line off those first two, it closes right in there, so I like that one. And you figure you'll get a measured move similar to that, but you figure you're probably going to the other side of the range, and off it goes. Turns out to be a great. So if you just caught these two trades here, they were really good trades. And then I like this one because we weren't quite back to the lows, and it's a failed second entry long. Notice the new high, pullback first entry, pullback second entry, and it's a turn down right off the trend line. Big bearish bar. This is not a great signal bar, but it's a trap. You can just use a stop there. You got enough room to get out before you reach these lows again, so you could just use a stop there. But if you wanted, you could let it break lower and drop a limit order in there just to be safe. But you might have missed that trade if you did that. It did pull back, and you could have gotten filled again and entered. But I don't like entering here because now even though you got a little double top there, there's too much support across here. It's bounced every time. So I think you just need to sit tight and wait. And then, it's tempting to go long here, but this thing ends up closing way back down, kind of neutral. So you just kind of sit. I don't like going short right there, even though you could treat that like a, somebody else asked me about this. Was this a failed second entry long? Uh, Not really, but there is a double top there. Um, so you could kind of treat it like a failed second. Here's where your real failed second entry long was, back here. You never really made a new high after that, but this double top is here, so you could treat it like one, very similar to over here. But you don't want to go short right into that support there, because look what happened to you over here, and there's a good chance the same thing happens. Even though it goes lower and goes without, you just got to watch it, and unfortunately, that'll happen sometimes. But you're better off not to let it bother you or tempt you, because the next time it'll do what it did over here, and you'll say, I knew I shouldn't have taken that trade. So sometimes they break through, but you want to wait on a good indication that we're still going lower, or a breakout pullback short, and you really don't even get a good breakout pullback short. It never can get back up there to test that, um, for whatever reason. It can't get back up there. Well, the market, not for whatever reason, but because it's just the market's too weak, um, and we just keep working lower here. And it finally comes back to the trend line right there. It's tempting to go short here, and you could, but I think you're better off to wait and see what happens. And then it breaks higher again and then turns back down, and now you got a better entry right here, and it's right off that trend line, and you got a big bearish bar. So I like that one. If you really wanted to, you could have used a limit order on this other one. I think you're better off to wait. And generally when where are all the best entries off the key entry points, which are the trend lines, the EMA, and all that, and you see how big the move was. Where do all these big moves come from? I talk about this all the time. But you got to see all this stuff, and I'd be surprised. I mean, people probably don't even recognize that little trend line working down through there. But if you recognize it, you kind of get what's going on. Um, and I think the reason we really couldn't work higher here was not only the shorter term trend line, but this midline was in here. And you probably wouldn't have been aware of it yet, unless you're really keen at finding this stuff. But it was there. And you can see how those closes work right down through there on both sides. I mean, it's no doubt that's valid. And you get the bounce off of it there. It's there. Whether you see it or not, it's there. Um, and the reason I like this long is because you're looking more at the range, and this was just a little trend down the other side of the range. But look what happens. You get a new low, pull back, first entry, pull back, and there's a second entry right there, big bearish bar. This is where people get trapped real easy, because they don't understand, that you don't go short way down here after all this move down at at the very low of the day. People don't know that, and so I like going long right there. And again, if you later on the day, you wouldn't want to do this, but at this point, the range looks like the main play, and you got a perfect measured move down. So if you know to look for that, and you get a double bottom and a failed second entry short and a trap right there, that's a good place to go long. And look what happens. It goes straight back up to the other side, the midpoint of the range, rather. This is supposed to be blue, and I forgot to change it. So let's change that one. But anyway, you're working up, and you get a little second entry long. Notice the new high. There's a pullback first entry, pullback second entry. So it's a second entry long, right off the midline, right off of this trend line. We're not back to the midpoint. We're not back to the high. Odds are that's where we're headed, and it's working right up that trend line, and that confirms that trend line. And notice what happens though. It gets that little tick lower, and you probably trap some people trying to get short that don't know what's going on. And I like that one for a long, and turns out to be a good trade. And where does it turn down? Right at the midpoint, and that kind of sets you up for your trend line up here. But you should have already drawn that off the lows and been thinking about something up here. You probably would have had it up here at that point, but when it turns down right there, you want to draw that across there. Just I mean, it fits perfect, so you want to put it there just to be sure. And you can see what happens. It turns down off of it multiple times going forward. So, and again, it's real tempting to go short here, but you didn't really have a close outside this one, and this is just a midpoint. Now, if this had been up here, I probably was, with that little bitty bar, and really you might want to risk it. Like I said, it's a real small bar. It looks a lot like a doji, but it's closing in its lower third. It's like 3 ticks, and it closes, and that could have easily closed down. This is a big bearish bar. So even, and look how far away from the EMA you are. So, that one probably should be green as well. I'm not going to make that one red because you generally want to wait on a second entry. So I'm going to make it green. And you really hadn't had a break of this line yet, so that makes it a little bit leery. And you do get a second entry, but look where it's at, and that's the reason I marked this one green. Uh, it is a range, so you're probably figuring it's going to the other side. Um, but you just don't get a very good signal bar till here. And so you might have waited on a break of it, and when it broke lower, dropped a limit order in where your stop would have originally gone, or maybe even tick back to see if you could get filled. So this is not a perfect setup, so I am going to make it green. And then it continues to work lower, but it never really gives you a good setup here. It just doesn't give you a chance to get in. This one, is one you might think about. It looks like you get a little congestion. It's like a little breakout pullback short. But again, you don't get a very good setup bar. There's a lot of overlap. So I think you're better off just to wait. And you don't want to go long here because you hadn't gotten back down to the support area. You don't have a break of this short-term trend line. This is one of those little surprise moves that you watch, and you just have to kind of watch it go without you. Um, there's not much else you can say about it. And then we turn down here. It's a first entry. It's been a big move up, and you're way away from the EMA, and it turns down right off of that. Again, I made it green because it's market's really bullish going up there, and you got to be careful going short. But if you're seeing the big picture, this one could be almost red. So I still made it green. You probably want to let it break lower and use a limit order and try to make it as small as you, but it's not a real big bar anyway, so I'm okay even using a stop there if you're being aggressive, because it's probably coming back to the EMA even if it's going to go higher. And it kind of shoots through the EMA, and then it just kind of gets, look how flat that is, and look at all the bars stacked up. I do like the long again because it comes off the midline right here, but look what happens. It pulls down, and there's actually a second entry long there, but I don't think you want to go long right there. It's just not a good place to go long. The trend is down, the bias is down rather. It's another one that probably could be green, but I'm not going to mark it. I like to just sit here and watch because you got so many. I think you're better off just kind of sit still and watch, and then it really gets all clogged up. But notice this low. There's a pullback. There's a first entry, and there's a pullback, and there's a second entry short, and that's a kind of a bearish type reversal bar. And I don't think you want to go short on that one because it's just a little failed break out of that congestion. But when it fails down and fails out the other side and turns up after coming off the midline, you figure it's probably going up to here, and maybe this is not valid and it's a range and it's going back up there. So I liked it for an aggressive long there, but you could make the point for an aggressive long here as well. So go ahead, and there's a lot of these in here today. But personally, I think you're better off just to wait and see what happens. So when it comes up here and it turns down right off that trend line again and gives you a bearish bar, just go short right there. And then it comes back up and tests it again. You would have scalped out of here, so this would have come back and got your runners. Otherwise, I'd say this is a nice add-on trade, but gives you another big bearish bar, and now people kind of got it figured out. And what it is, they probably trapped some longs there. All those moves higher, and people don't see the bigger picture and they just get trapped there. And this turns out to be a great move. There's a failed second entry long right there, but you don't want to go short down here near all these lows. I think you're better off just to wait. And then guess what? It comes down, bounces, bounces, and but look at all that overlap. So, but you get a little trap right there. Look how bearish that bar is, and there's going to be the same way it did it back over here. They're going to try to get short here. And so if you want to be aggressive, you might consider buying that one just because it's right off the strong support area, and it's not a bad place to go long. So most of the time it's going to go higher. But if you're paying attention, I would say don't go long there unless you're being super aggressive and you're just trying to go every way on a day that is kind of a neutral day, so to speak. So, but then you move up. You get a first entry, pull back, and you get a second entry short. It's right off that trend line. It confirms it. It really confirmed it here. But then when you get this next one right here, I would probably use a limit order here because you got a little congestion. But that's the reason you got the congestion, because people are just confused. They don't understand what's happening. But when you get the second entry short here, notice this double bottom. So this is actually a second entry short right here. But I wasn't convinced we wouldn't go through that yet. But when we made this little higher low, I liked jumping in there with a limit order and going short right there. So that's a possibility. And then it runs down, and look how it shoots right through the support this time. Doesn't hold it all. And then it turns down right off of it again. Again, it's a little bit aggressive. But I still like this for an aggressive short. It's at the midline, but it's just like a break. It's basically a breakout pullback short, and you may consider using a limit order there. Again, it's real aggressive, and you're probably better off just to wait. But if you did that, you didn't get much else, many more options, because we're headed back up. And now when it bounces down here, right off that lower, let me back out some. When it bounces down here right off that line and all those touches, now you know you got a two-tiered trading range, or not a trading range, a two-tiered trend channel working down. And even though there's room to scalp out going higher here, this one's real tempting. And if you really want, especially when it turned down again right there and turned back up and it gets back inside, that one's tempting, but this one's is actually almost legit long. So I probably should mark it green because it is just borderline being able to make it blue for different reasons. But if you see this big channel, the big two-tiered channel, you got a question going long right there, because there's a good chance it breaks higher and turns out to trap you to the long side and turns down. And then it runs up, and it's right off that trend line again. Let me make it back out. Fairly bearish bar. This one is I mean, this one could be red almost. It really could. But I made it green. It's borderline, but it could almost be red. I think you're better off to wait on the next entry, which comes here, and you get a bearish bar, and it turns out to be a great trade. But you got a shorter term one working up, and you had a break in a new high. And then it pushed up for another high, but you got this bigger channel, and you can see that trend line working up there, and we bounced right off of it. We don't have a break yet, but the bigger trend channel is overplaying it, and that's why it turns back down. And then it comes back, and you get a break of it here, but look at that big bearish bar. You know you're going to get a retest of the low, and there's a good chance you could run all the way down to here, and it actually goes further than that. So you don't want to enter short way down here. Not a good signal bar. It would have worked, but that's one of those you just kind of got to watch. And that really, look how flat it went and just kind of danced around into the 2 o'clock hour. So nothing else happening there. So really interesting day. Lots of trades, but there's a lot of green ones in there, and I hate to have so many green ones. But this is one of those days where you just have to be careful. And if you're not, I guarantee you there's a bunch of it that probably got chewed alive right through here. And you notice most all of those through there are green. It's just if you, especially if you see the two-tiered channel, that's one thing. But if you don't see that two-tiered channel, um, you got to be real careful down through here. And really, what was happening was the two-tiered channel is taking precedence over the range, and so prices are swinging back and forth between the trend line and the midline of this trend channel. And that's why it got so flat there. It wasn't really because it's just in a trading range. And notice how it's making lower highs. That is a sign that you may break lower. That's generally what you'll start to see, and it's because there's a trend line in there. So when you start to see these lower highs, pay attention to them. And but that's why prices got so flat here. They were swinging back and forth between this trend channel or this trend line and this midline of this two-tiered channel. So hopefully that helps some of you that might have gotten confused in there. And you know, this stuff is not that easy to see when you're not experienced at it. As you do this more, you can glance at the chart and see it almost. I mean, I really can glance at the chart, and I still try to draw my lines because sometimes you can't tell if there's been a close outside of it or not because it's without drawing it on there. But you know, you can just glance at when you've done this long enough and you get really experienced at it, you can just glance at the chart and you see this stuff. So I promise you, even if you don't see it now, one day if you keep studying your charts and you keep working on it, you'll see it. And it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of time and energy and dedication. But when you look at it every day for hours on end, you get to where you see it. So just be aware of that. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else. We did go back and talk about yesterday in the news item, so I wanted to talk about that. I guess that's really about it for today. So good day. A lots of trades, but you know, by the time we get down here and turn down here again, I mean, the bias is down, and you got to be real careful going long after that. So, but really up until we broke lower here and then came back to this line, the clues are here, but there's not enough there to make you, especially on these two, to make you say, hey, I really trust that at this point. But once you turn down off of it twice more, the clues are there. But you still got to be real careful. And when it broke lower here and bounced right off that low part, those lows, that's definitely a clue that, hey, this channel's in play. So anyway, really good trading day, interesting trading day. Just like yesterday was pretty interesting as well, but this is a little different. It's not a typical kind of day you see. Um, so not much else I can say about it. I'm going to wrap it up for the day. We'll be back again to do it Monday. Remember, no chart lesson on Fridays. But this is Mack with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and we'll see you next time.